when it comes to Chairman Dan. Chairman Dan in Victoria loves a distraction, and he is desperately trying to have a distraction from a lot of different things right now, including a law that he's trying to shove through the Parliament, which would allow public servants to have the same power as police to arrest people or to enter their homes to see whether everyone is appropriately socially distancing. Now, unbelievably, lawyers are starting to come forward and actually talking about the common sense position here, because thankfully cases are getting better in Victoria. So why does this law need to be there, well, frankly, at all? Of course, Andrews, who has already got a 6-month blank cheque extension on his unlimited powers from a sellout upper house, guess what he's willing to do now? Negotiate with the upper house. And what will he do? He'll get the laws passed. Because the Greens will break their maternity leave to save his ass, the Animal Justice Party probably can't read the legislation, and Fiona Patten will sell out every day. Because despite the fact that she is the member for the Reason Party, her ultimate reason is her. When she thought she wouldn't have a spot in the Victorian Parliament, guess what she was going to do? Work for Daniel Andrews. She wrote opinion pieces about the extension to the 6-month lockdown laws. Well, they were disgraceful, but it was fantastic because she was able to negotiate the whole thing down to 6 months rather than 12 months. She will sell out. These laws will happen. But when asked about this today, about whether the laws that would let a public servant arrest you in Victoria, would it have made any difference if those powers had existed at the height of the second wave, caused, of course, by hotel quarantine? Unsurprisingly, Andrews can't tell you.
Have there been situations in the pandemic so far where having these rules would have changed the outcome?
I'm not sure.
Change the subject. Like, this is ridiculous. Equally so too, there's a court case that is on at the moment into the curfew in Melbourne, where literally you are locked in your house. While I appreciate the Victorian government forcing people to watch this show at 9 o'clock each and every night, I think they can do it of their own free will. But when asked by a court to actually provide some documentation about the curfew that, remember, he said the health people wanted, but the health people didn't want it, the police wanted it, the police didn't want it, oh, that's right, I did it anyway. No, you can't have the data that justifies the curfew. Then there's the disgrace that is the hotel inquiry. Now remember, this is meant to look like a coroner's investigation. This is meant to look like a court case. This is meant to look like a royal commission. But it's not. You can, legally, lie to it. It is no different than any other kangaroo court which has a preordained outcome, which is we get off the hook. Now remember, 700 people have died. There has to be accountability. There has to be a consequence. Politicians lose their job for way less. He says he's going to be held ultimately responsible, but ultimately responsible is not going to be able to simply say sorry and move on. But the farce of this inquiry is that while nobody is willing to take responsibility, everyone is willing to say that they didn't know what was going on. So now the reason they should all lose their job is, frankly, incompetence. They have used incompetence as the defence for a series of decisions that have resulted in hundreds of people dying. Front page of the Australian newspaper today showed 7 different faces that have all come forward and done the Sergeant Schultz. I know nothing. Well, you can add a couple of other ones. Here's another minister pretending, oh, I don't know, decisions? We only get paid to make them.
I don't recall specifically how I became aware of that. It may have been from media reportage, it may have been from a conversation, but I don't have a specific recollection of how I first became aware of that.
It was his job to hire the security guards, but he can't tell us who told him to hire the security guards. The police minister, whose officers were not used in hotel quarantine, as it was the case in every other state, and it's worked, guess what? She couldn't remember either.
As I recall it, and I think I say in my statement, I have some memory, but not full memory, is I believe private security was raised by Commissioner Crisp. I'm pretty confident the ADF issues were raised by Mr Ashton.
Seriously, her hair is more believable than anything she's actually saying. But this is again and again. But again, one more time, the minister's got nothing to say. Guaranteed job, six-figure salary, ultimate power under the law, but no accountability.
That private security were going to have a function of enforcement in the hotel quarantine program. Did you have any view yourself about the appropriateness or otherwise of that decision?
So it didn't jump out at me as being a major issue.
Honestly, every day, every person, the same response. Yet people go on Twitter and say that it's a Murdoch conspiracy. It's called accountability. It's called human decency. Their ultimate defence is that they had no idea what they were doing. That's a sackable offence. Or they knew what they were doing but won't own up to it. And that's a sackable offence that should keep you awake at night. I said that you could lie before this inquiry because Daniel Andrews has done it before and got away with it. Remember when he said there was no offer of ADF? Well, Andrew Clennell broke this news tonight, which is one of the letters that the Prime Minister had actually sent to Daniel Andrews. Unsurprisingly, in black and white, there's an offer there of ADF personnel. So what's Daniel Andrews' plan of how to get out of this sticky situation? He was supposed to be giving evidence today in that inquiry, but they spun out the know-nothing ministers. He won't be appearing tomorrow. He will be appearing on Friday afternoon, which is traditionally the time that companies, and certainly governments, put out the trash. It's the council clean-up day in New South Wales or hard rubbish day in Victoria. See, I know my border talk. And the thing is that this bloke is planning to appear at that inquiry, do the same I know nothing, but then he will be able to get one day of bad press out of it, and then on Sunday he will announce, suddenly, miraculously, we're going to lift a lot of restrictions, which means the headline news story on Sunday night will be the restrictions, not the accountability, not the 700 people who died. Here's Daniel Andrews foreshadowing that very move today in his press conference.
Are you looking at going a bit further than what you'd outlined a few weeks ago?
Yes, I am, but I'm not in a position to give you a full list of the things we're looking at.
So how is this bloke able to get away with it? Because many of his media mates let him get away with it. Yet another example of two more ministers. We now have 9 people on the record who had the decision-making power, who've all done the I know nothing. But what was the lead story tonight in Melbourne? Of course, it was Daniel Andrews talking about lifting restrictions on Sunday.
The Premier has confirmed he's considering lifting more restrictions on Sunday than initially outlined in his COVID roadmap. Health officials say we're doing better than expected, with Victoria recording just 15 new cases.
Oh, he's confirmed he's considering. Breaking news. Breaking news was happening in the inquiry today, yesterday, the day before, last week, last month. The breaking news in Victoria is that people can't leave their homes and haven't for weeks. The reason? Because of the failures of hotel quarantine. So while those of you who like to be the human shields for Chairman Dan on Twitter will scream at those of us who say this is not on, stick it up your jumper, because normal people can see what's happening here. Normal people can see that the people responsible are going to get away for it. And what makes it even more galling in Victoria is that Victoria have passed laws to say that if you are a director of a building company but somebody died on one of your work sites, the suits in the boardroom would still be held personally responsible for the failures. Your mother, your father, your grandparents, hundreds of them have died. Yet the suits in Spring Street, they get to walk away with it, cheered on by a media who've given in. It is not an act of insanity to question your government. It is not an act of patriotism to look the other way. It is not an act of humanity to buy that these people didn't know what they were doing. Because if they didn't, that is an even bigger bloody out.